Thank you so much for joining us on the Be Inspired podcast. So we have Hay Lam Yau with us today, and we're going to be talking about psych safety. So he has actually created an entire system to be able to test and measure psych safety and be able to see the things that you're putting in place are working or not. We're going to go through and have a little bit of a chat about what is psych safety and also how it's not just about what that applies to within new compliance and WHS laws across Australia, but how it's more important to actually building businesses and teams that function well. So, hey Lam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Wonderful to join you.
Excellent. Now, hey Lam, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this entire space in your journey?
Yeah, perhaps it goes back quite a long time when I come through the corporate world, where because I'm of an immigrant background, and when you're an immigrant, your parents teach you to work hard, be a good boy, and you'll be successful. So I did that until I got to the top of a couple of blue chip organizations. And when I was up there, we were set some incredibly groundbreaking financial targets. So just to share the scale, it was 800 million incrementals on top of additional profit in 3 years was the target. And we'd already done it before in the UK. So when we
So you were in the UK and then you came to Australia, is that right? Doing it? Okay, excellent.
That's correct. And the organization in Australia was so task focused on hitting these 800 million that it forgot about the people. So we worked extremely long hours. We were very stressed. Failure was not an option. Constant being threatened with being fired if you failed. We're in the newspapers every day telling how rubbish we were. And the effect that it had on me personally was that I went into overwhelm personally. So I'm not a theorist on doing what I do. I've actually experienced the consequences of not having a safe workplace, which back then it was very much stiff upper lip. It's why we pay you the big bucks. So get on with it. And you're expected to plow through it. The unfortunate things are I didn't have the skills to navigate it. The environment didn't have the want to deal with it. And I only had one tool, which is in that circumstance, if you're failing or you perceive that you're failing, I just worked harder and harder and harder. I ran out of hours and then I fell over.
And it's quite funny. That's not a story. It's a story you hear too many times, isn't it? Right? I mean, it can be that story where it's the enormous pressure and then just people burning and burning and burning. Or it can be where it's such a highly competitive environment that everybody kind of just cuts each other out and everything like that versus working as a team. And the funny thing is, and I've had organizations like that, and luckily not part of them during that time, or I've had those types of things. It's not an environment I would work in, but they just spin wheels. And the funny thing is that you go through people, and if you think about it, I've got this theory about working smarter, not harder, right? Doesn't mean I don't do my own wheel spinning, but it's actually having the ability to you don't have to work as hard if you're smarter about doing it. And often when I find people in those situations, you can't think clearly. So all you're doing is just burning more hours. And, we work with a lot of organizations that bill by the hour, right? And they'll have project fees and then they'll be doing this and then they just end up it's like, we're going to go to this, we're going to do this. And it's particularly in creative spaces, it's like, well, you actually need your brain to be able to create solutions. And then you just see people like, oh, we need no money on that project. And you're like, well, you probably could have solved the problems a lot more efficiently if people had been able to breathe and think about things. And generally, it can come from the top or setting unrealistic expectations. Look, this pressure obviously is there. We work in the built environment. We work with people who build buildings and there has to be stuff built and there's lots of this dynamics within teams and dynamics across organizations and things too. But let's talk about how when you are in that sort of hamster wheel and that situation that occurs, burnout and things like that we can turn things around.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I probably want to share with your audience is don't take my word for it. There are so many quantitative and qualitative research into this. It's a Gartner back in 2023. Kinsey's themselves have done a piece of work on it. There is a causal effect that if you improve psychological safety in the workplace, your actual performance and your uh, tangible financial or objective KPIs results improve.
Mm.
So it's no longer a perception or a myth or something that some Californian organization back in the 80s said this is what you're supposed to be doing, so it's intuitive. No, there is factual research that actually shares this now.
Well, tell us some of the stats that have been found within that research. I know you have it sort of there for use around the spot. I mean, whilst you are doing that, I mean, it is something now that we obviously, and we'll talk about this, legislation has been put in place for that, with psychological safety. So we're not just about a safe workplace that we physically walk around in, but that we operate in, because the stats of how much we're seeing within, people in burnout and the psychological effects and what that's having on the economy is in itself an issue. And I mean, that's
Absolutely.
interrelated. So, do you want to state some of those things that some of these big companies have actually found that bring some qualitative?
Yeah, let's just go with a couple because there's so many. I'll read out a few of their headlines. The research from Deloitte found that organizations fostering psychological safe environments experienced up to a 30% improvement in employee engagement and 25% increase in team performance metrics. Let's go with
Massive.
another. Yeah, let's go with another. I'm going to stay with the quantitative.
Yeah.
So McKinsey's research from a 2020 survey of 1,574 participants found that a positive team climate has a significantly stronger direct effect on psychological safety than other drivers, and that team leaders displaying supportive and consultative behaviors have the strongest influence on psychological safety. The studies found that psychological safety is linked to improved innovation, experimentation, agility, and better overall organizational health and performance.
Yeah. And I mean, and bottom lines at the end of the day, and I think that's the funny thing, because we're actually talking about people, right? And,
Yes.
there's that human resources, being an HR person, but it actually is, and I know from the design world, it's like, oh, if you can improve your environment, we design a beautiful workplace, you get 1 or 2% out of your largest cost spend. Well, it's one of those things that it's actually not, and as much in the built environment does make a difference, being a lovely space is, you can be in a lovely space, but if the team isn't functioning well together, or if you're okay with certain behaviors and that becomes the norm, it's as somebody having a podcast, I love this. It's the behavior you walk past is the behavior that you accept,
Yes.
right? Those types of things. So you know, I know I've got some stats here too that, Gallup found that, where you've got psych safety, you have a reduction of up to 27% in turnover. And you think how much it costs to replace somebody alone, that if you've got psych safety, your burnout is at least 2.6 less. So you think about that. When we talk about burnout, that could be somebody leaving, right? That could be the end effect. It could be having a, workplace came against you. Obviously we're talking about the psych safety laws, but we're also talking about, what that looks like. And people can be on quite extended leave and what that looks like. And they're very, very hard cases to deal with. But, it's also then, the fact that burnout actually means the productivity that you're using for the brain that you're paying for is actually diminished as well. And the time that it takes for burnout, we're both through it. It can take up to a year or 2 years to really recover and get that back. And you think about that, it's like filling up a glass. Once you've burnt that out, it doesn't just, go away on holidays for 4 weeks and it just comes. No, you're talking about fully diminished in the capabilities of a human being and what we're paying for in the brain doing it. It can be seen to up to 40% of presenteeism. How much are we paying per day for people to have 6 days? And, it's okay. We talk about those doona days or well-being days, but half of the time it's not just the presenteeism in actually people selecting to have a day off for a mental health day. It's also somebody said the other day, they literally had to quit a job because they were sick for 5 weeks. And I've been there and I've done it, just extended amounts through that effect. So we're talking about massive stats here. And if we think about that, besides what you're finding in that, we're talking about an ROI on some of on your largest part. We do all these nice things. Let's have the cupcakes. Let's do all this type of stuff. But actually, it's getting these things right that is going to have the largest effect on people.
Yeah. Let me go into even more practical what happens in the exec room.
Yes, well, let's talk about that because
In the ELT, SLT, whatever you want to call your leadership team, in managing very complex strategies, in making really tough decisions, the thing that psych safety does is that, and I'm going to do contrast, when it's unsafe and we have an unsafe environment, then we have these human needs like a need to belong, a need to feel that we're good enough, need to be heard. When the environment is unsafe, we will display those needs in very different ways to when it is safe. So an example, when it's unsafe and we have a need to belong, I will shut up if it's unsafe. I could absolutely believe that my boss is saying absolutely the wrong thing. I'm going to spend 3 weeks doing something. It's a waste of time, waste of money, but I'm going to go, yes, in public, no, in private. Or a peer of mine saying something, and I just happily let it happen for self-protection. When the environment is safe, this is just a very one vignette of what happens. I am happy to voice my opinion and let it be debated properly.
Yeah.
Imagine what 3 weeks of resource, time, of going down the wrong track is costing each project, both in scale of time lost, creep in your project, as well as resource costs in rework.
Oh, and particularly if you've got clients, it's not just an internal. You're talking about missing deadlines. You're talking about suddenly failing at the parts, losing your reputation and things like that. And you know what, Haley, I wish I could say I don't see it more, but I do. I mean, we work with a lot of architects, and we talk about this collaboration as a general value that you were here, and I think it's fundamental to the design process, really, that you can have that debate of ideas and things like that. But I have observed situations where, there's that leader that's so loud that won't just do and attacks and interrupts and everybody just sits around, let alone when they leave. They're just so burnt out and they just feel like, well, why would I do this? But it has a massive effect. So why don't we just go back a bit of a step? Tell us a little bit. You worked all the way up top. Then you actually then coached, worked with executives and CEOs, and then really what brought this psych safety side of things out in what you were observing and where you saw that as like one of the main things between succeeding or creating organizations that were on the right path and organizations that were getting off the track?
It's a great question. It actually stems from 3 things that I learnt through coming through the ranks. Big corporates teach you these things. They never, not overtly, they don't sit you down. This is the classroom. This is what you do. It's just you pick it up as you go along. And you basically learn 3 things that I have labeled them operational excellence. So operational excellence means there are 3 fundamental masteries that an organization needs to become. One is need to get rid of your cock-ups.
I'm writing this down.
For blue chip organizations, they call it quality assurance, Six Sigma, whatever you want to call it. But fundamentally, stop your cock-ups, because the rework that you do is costing you a fortune, as well as upsetting your customers. Number 2 is get rid of your bottlenecks. Master that. So products and service gets to your customers faster and faster with no increase in operating costs or limited or disproportionate increases in your operating.
Generally, decreasing sometimes.
And number 3 is getting your team to work together, which is psychological safety, because a company is actually an organization where it's like a complex chain of people passing the message from one end right through to the customer. And if any member of that chain does not want to work the way that the rest of the organization needs to work, or is resistant or has an old way and not wanting to do the new way.
Mm.
Then the ultimate is the customer fails. And what that actually sounds like, it doesn't sound like that. What it actually sounds like when it's not safe, if I can share what it was like when I was in my job in the exec level, it was a very simple business. You buy a product, you move a product, you sell a product. It's as simple as that. It's no more. So we had a head of buying, quite a head of moving it, and we had a head of
Mm.
selling it. So we come to a weekly meeting, CEO would sit there. And before I understood all of this and learned to have the courage to manage it, this was my day. I'd walk into that weekly meeting and I had one objective. And the one objective is to get out of that meeting and not be the one that gets my ass kicked. That
I
was the
wish I could
objective.
say that's not a common feeling or get out of this meeting. Yeah.
I had no other objective. Someone's going to get the bum kicked, just not be me.
Mm.
So I'd sit there and it always went in the same sequence. It was an update meeting and it went with buy. Buy would say whatever they need to say. And I wasn't listening to what they were saying at all. I was looking at my list on my sheet going, oh, I've got a red there, writing down the excuse I had for that, green
Yeah.
there. And then all of a sudden I hear my name being called. He said, Hey Lam. And I go, yes, okay, I've got a red here, but I've already sorted that out. It won't happen again. Didn't get my ass kicked. Great. Next one, amber. I'm great. Rest of green. I'm all good. Good. Sell. And it goes to sell. And then sell would get a serve for whatever they didn't do. Not understanding that there could have been a real reason why sell couldn't do it was because I chose to come in on budget on my labor costs, for example.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put on any overtime. So I look green on all my metrics. And in doing so and not scraping it into amber, Sell could have had a little bit more product to sell and could have made their target. But I'm not going to do that
Mm.
because I'm in self-preservation mode.
Yeah.
That's what lack of site safety does in the room.
Mm.
Contrast that to when I learned to have the courage to have site safety. It didn't mean that the team had it. It didn't mean we learned it. I just learned to have the courage to do something different. Same meeting several months later, and said, we're going to run this promotion with this blue chip company. We are targeting $2 million extra sales and this whatever detail that I'm going to give you. For the first time, I listened and I said, excuse me, can I ask a question, which was never asked before. No peer challenged any other peer in this group. And I said, Mr. Bay, didn't we run that exact same promotion 4 weeks ago with the same messaging, with the same details, with the same target of $2 million, and we lost $1 million? And he went, yes. So I said, why are we doing it again? At which point the CEO, because he didn't know how to handle this level of conversation, went, great question. I will take that offline. Instead of dealing it we didn't even have the safety to deal with the problem. So I just wanted to show you those two small examples of how when it's safe and when it's unsafe and the
Yeah.
difference
Yeah.
and what it means. That could have been an extra $1 million in 1 week.
And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because people think when you get to an exec, they think, oh, that's the thing and they've got all the power and that's it. But at the end of the day, it's just another level of peers, right? And I mean, I see it in the other side, a lot of the businesses, as I said, we work with, they're also about sharing leads and growing the business and doing that. But people then just end up not talking about who they're talking to or what they're doing. And it becomes very, siloed and people have their own thing and it's just, what do I need to do to survive? And I mean, I've struggled to know you do environments and you create and how quickly and you tell people what they need. But again, it's the behavior either that you accept. I think the hard part is that in a situation like that, when you're talking in, listed companies, let's say, that the CEO's job is to get to the top to run something, right? And that's an interesting part because there's a little bit off site safety, but I think it is also a conversation around the types of leaders and what we do promote, right? I think a leader's role is to get the best and to get everybody rowing in the same direction. Alignment is a very big core value of, I'm an ex-rower. For me, I know what it's like sitting in a rowing boat and you're all rowing together, you know when somebody is not, but you can feel it, right? And I always take that into how we build teams and how we approach things in that too. You know, we try and turn things around from when people are having reviews. We don't do that. That's backward facing. It's going to create to, let's talk about forward facing. Let's talk about the learnings. What are the learnings out of this? Make sure this conversation is much about how can we as an organization be better. Sometimes you can do it. Sometimes you can't fix everything. But at the end of the day, it's about, I often believe the answers are actually within your people. They're paying for brains at
Yeah.
the end of the day. And, you know, otherwise we might as well outsource everything to AI because it can just give you the nice, oh, that's very nice, sir. That's great, sir. Right. But at the end of the day, we're solving problems that we need the cognitive functions or the teamwork and the dynamics that people have to come together. And I mean, we both work in this space. You know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and psych safety fits into some elements of that. But it's also that self-actualization. A lot of people had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, I don't think you realize that a lot of people do go to work and they don't love what they do. They don't feel the passion. They don't feel the drive. They don't feel the motivation, how they're changing the world and doing that. But as human beings are built as tribes, that's the way, as you said, we need to feel belonging. We need those elements. We are not machines that just go and do. We've survived. I've been listening to a great audiobook and the development of human beings over millions of years. And this is how we've actually survived as a species, is by actually working together and doing that. We're useless. If you put us in savannah, we'd be, dead in 2 seconds in comparison to most animals that can kill and hunt. It's how we actually work together. Nothing is just created by one person. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of the time, that it becomes to, especially if you've got an organization of a hierarchy, that people feel like you have to get to the top. And it's funny how many people get to the top and go, I worked so hard to get to here. And then
Right.
it's the same shit, but just a different crowd. Or I've got the pressure hasn't gone, or it hasn't changed for me either. But the satisfaction in working with people along the way and what you actually can create as a team is a lot more satisfying than
Yes.
just that. And it's, as I said, I work with the built environment. So they get the satisfaction of driving past and going, I built that, right? I was part of a team that built that. But if people have had a terrible experience, either on the project with other people on the project too, they will literally go, yeah, that's great, but they'll just remember the damage. And that's that
Yeah.
old saying, people don't remember what you did for them. They remember how you made them feel.
Very true. If I can build on that, and again, experiencing the same strategy, the same targets between a UK company that I was at. It's just so,
Mm,
so I thought it was a UK company that makes it different. It was just the different way of running the company. And it stems from, I got really angry 3 days ago when I read something on LinkedIn by somebody posing as an expert on burnout. And it's a very deliberate post that said the only way to overcome burnout is to do less. I've never wanted to throw my phone across the room so fast as when I read that. And I went, this is such a naive version of burnout, to do
mm,
less. Burnout for me has no link to time or no link to how hard you work. And the
mm,
contrast was exact same strategy in the UK as it was in Australia. UK, we worked probably even longer hours, even harder, and we loved it. Similar sort of hours in Australia, but because of the environment and it was unsafe, we went into burnout. What do I mean by that? When you are in an unsafe environment, you are, what I was, compromised a lot.
mm,
I was, because I needed the safety of myself to provide for my family and my reputation, to not lose my job, and all the human constructs of failure floating in my head. I thought the easier route was to eat so many shit sandwiches that were being dealt out. And because of that, when there were too many shit sandwiches that I couldn't cope with, too much compromising of myself that I couldn't cope with, that's when I
mm,
started not enjoying it and started to fall over. And every day became horrible.
mm,
It wasn't purely aggression by the hierarchy or passive aggressiveness. There was obviously that. There was lots of artificial harmony, lots of people being very nice. Oh, did you have a good weekend? Did you? All that existed. And if you observed it between the UK company and Australian company, they would have sounded so similar, except when it mattered.
So can we talk about that? I want to unpack that a
Of
little
course,
bit. So let's talk about that term that you just used, because I think it's a great one. Artificial harmony. So
yeah.
what does that look like versus a genuine harmony?
Yeah, I didn't create it. It was a guy called Patrick Lencioni who wrote The Five Dysfunctions of the Team.
Oh,
I just
right, yeah.
plagiarized it. He uses the term artificial harmony, which I think is the best way to describe it. Artificial harmony is when we have two versions of trust, so that we need to have. The first trust is predictability trust. Predictable that you would do what you say you're going to do. So if I say I'm going to deliver on that strategy by FY 2027 in full, on time, signed up, I will.
Mm,
Or even at a minor version, I will turn up at this meeting at 2:30. I will be there at 2:30, not 2:31, not 2:35. No, there's a predictability about it.
yeah. Okay.
Sounds easy. It's a fundamental. We need to be able to trust each other that we'll be there. The second trust is vulnerability trust. Vulnerability trust is when I can say whatever I need to say amongst my peer group without being vilified, being made to feel stupid, or to be ostracized because I've said it, or to live under the fear of saying anything that matters.
Mm.
Whereas when it's a genuinely safe area and there is a genuine harmony, it doesn't mean we're all happy, clappy, hugging each other. It doesn't mean any of that. It actually probably means the different, which is we can have the most robust of conversations. As I do in my company now, this is not something I teach or share. It is a way of working, a way of living. I have my business partners, sat them down a few weeks ago and said, there's an elephant in the room. This is late, it's too expensive, and actually the quality is not great. And because we've been able to build that environment between us, that we know this is a necessary way of chatting and shortcutting, we both took it in the spirit that it was taken.
Yeah.
And he didn't go away thinking, I want to smash her head in for saying that. But to my face, he's going, thank you very much, is what we're taught. Thank you for feeding back. It was a genuine, wow, yeah. And thank you for, he did say, thank you for being the only one that cared enough to hold me. Because done with that tone.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that gives you an indication
No,
of
I
that.
love it. That's why I thought it's when people have terms and it's either you haven't heard it or it's actually unpacking that and doing that. So let's talk a little bit about the product that you've created just on a high end side of things and what the change that you're looking to bring and how you've actually used this. You had this tool yourself, how you've used it and how you've actually seen it make a difference.
Great question. So first of all, the design part of it stemmed from I was not able to work last year. I was living overseas for personal reasons. Nothing heinous, by the way, audience. I wasn't running away
You're
from.
allowed to go and live and work where you want or not work. It's okay.
I've only just been allowed back in the country. No, nothing like that. It's just a personal reason I had to. And my clients were ringing me and saying, look, could you help me? And I was going, I can't. I can't help you. I can't devote any time to this. But I still wanted to help them. And I couldn't figure out a way of helping them from overseas. And I was rattling my brain. I was asking myself the questions. Come on, figure it out. And it took me about 2 days and then penny dropped, which is when you're a coach and you walk into organizations and you create what they call the magic or whatever it is, and you get the big hug afterwards, thank you. And it's a dopamine hit for a coach. And it's very addictive for a coach. The unfortunate thing is we also call that heroic leadership. We have to be the hero. We are in the room and we withhold information and then we espouse it with our wisdom and then everybody goes. What I needed to find was what we call post-heroic leadership, meaning I don't need to be in the room because the smarts are your clients. That's what I was taught and I forgot it. The clients are the smart people. I'm here to extract that potential out of them. So from that, I went, rang them back and I said, if I could show you where your problems are using a tool and put fault codes against them and gave you language around them so you can articulate it yourselves, do you think you'd be able to solve them if you knew where the problem was? And he went, sure. And 101 psych safety stuff solves 80% of most organizations' problems. So I put the tool together with some help and sent it to them, and very primitive, and they started using it, and it was working. It was working really well, meaning, so the context was they're working on the right things. These are the things we measure. They're
Yeah.
working on the right things.
Yep.
Are they working at the right level? Are they creating predictability trust, meaning are we saying and doing what we say we're going to do? Are they have vulnerability trust, meaning if I think it or I feel it, can I say it in this team? Can I be myself in this team? Are they behaving as a team, meaning in this team, does status or my function outrank what this team needs?
Yeah.
In this team, do we take notice of each other's tones and moods and calibrate each other to see whether what I'm doing is being accepted or being little visuals that give you the clue that it's not landing? Do we have equal turns to speak? We only have
They're
17
very,
methods.
very basic, but very important.
Very basic. And because we shared those with them, they used the tool, and all they had to do was reverse the activity. If they weren't giving each other enough times to speak, then that's what they do.
Yeah.
So a real practical example of what you said, that one of the organizations, real big, hard company, big transport company. You can imagine what they're like. It's probably the same as a construction company. Very testosterone based organization. But they just could not get past the 50 million mark. They
Yeah,
tried for
right.
years, just couldn't get past the 50 million mark because they worked on all the strategy, the task, all the tangible
Yes.
things. They didn't work on this emotional side and the psych safety side at all. Gave them the tool, and the CEO and the founder, bless his cotton socks, used it, and he had it in front of him when he had every exec meeting, and he noticed his head of finance had winced over something, and he said, what's wrong? And the head of finance said, well, we'll take it outside afterwards and we'll talk about it after. And the CEO founder said, no, on here it says, do we give sufficient time to debate everything that needs to be debated? Is one of the metrics.
Yeah, wow.
So obviously we've never debated when things aren't right. So let's do it now. And as soon as he gave permission to the CFO to express himself, the CEO founder then said to me, because they did it without me, didn't need me in the room, said all the others piped up and shared exactly the same thought. And what the CEO, and that's why I said bless his cotton socks, was wise enough and open enough to go, so what's in my echo chamber in my head isn't always right. Just to show what the tool does and the psychological safety, what it actually creates.
I think it's great because I mean, I've worked in organizations. I must say the best leaders that I've worked with are the ones who are quite considered. They have a similar approach to you. They're slower and they'll listen to what everything's being said and then they'll let everybody else do their thing. But at the same time, we're talking about a room where we enable that, right? I think about where somebody asked me, oh, do we do this? What effect did this have? And I said, well, completely and utterly changed everything, the dynamic from a job that you love and you love going to and you feel like you're helping somebody to know that's dynamics completely changed and that voice is no longer heard. And it makes me think about, I think about those meetings and the changes that happen, the things that you've just identified, 100%. Just some of those things, do we actually enable that? Does that actually bring it out? Do we feel comfortable being able to enable? But also it's not just about everybody feeling like they can say what they want to say, but enabling is there equality actually around the room? Because as a dominant external, like I know my disc profile and things like that, and as somebody who talks, that's part of my process, but that's not part of somebody else's process. And sometimes some people will actually say, I do just want to go away and have a think about it. And, being that sort of ADHD, very quick sort of person. I'm like, "Ugh." But I've learned how important that is. Actually sleeping on it or going away and actually considering comes out with a much better decision than having to do things all around, or the largest voice gets heard. And often it's the voices that are the quietest that actually have the best insights. As much as that, it's great the CEO also took that upon himself. It's also managing the dynamics. As a leader, managing the dynamics of a room too, and realizing that, the founder and CEO, at the end of the day, you've put these amazing people in the room. How do you enable that magic comes out of each person, but the magic comes out of the dynamics of the team as well? And how do we actually get the best outcome? What's your approach to using this tool, approach from the psych safety point of view in managing that, where you have a lot of people who are quite outspoken, or there might even be cultural factors of where some people that's not what you do. How are some approaches that companies and teams can think about?
It's a great question. First of all, our tool is just a Geiger counter to say whether it's safe or unsafe. So I no longer do the training bit. I leave those activities to professionals like yourself to do that. Basically, again, it's because I don't need to be the hero in the room anymore. It's
Yeah.
not a need I'm searching for. When we actually designed the tool, and when I was doing this sort of work, I really only taught one framework. And the framework is because I'm an NLP
Yeah. Yeah.
practitioner,
Yeah.
comes from that, and it basically is called cause and effect. And cause and effect is basically helping people to stop being the victim of their own lives. Stop blaming everybody else, stop making excuses, stop giving power to your boss, your partner, your kids,
Yeah.
and being held hostage in your own life. But all that sits within our own heads. So as much as it's important for the leaders to create a safe environment, that's only 50% of the answer.
Mm.
If the human in themselves are unable to get out of their own, be hostage taken, they won't meet that environment halfway.
Mm.
So what I found really important is to share that concept of cause and effect, help them to not only understand it intellectually, more important for them to experience what it's like to feel taking power back,
Mm. Yeah.
to loosen the hostage that they've created in their heads, no longer fearing their own shadows and fearing what might happen on the what ifs. That is probably the most powerful piece of work. And then they can step into any space and be able to say things like, didn't you do that promotion 4 weeks ago and we lost $1 million?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. I mean, I work with different people in different stages in life too. Right? We all have ups and downs, and we all go through things. And sometimes it's the environment, something it's you've had a go and it didn't quite work out. People have run businesses, and sometimes they didn't factor in the tax, which is the fun part. And I see people at different points in their careers. You can talk to somebody and they're confident as, and you can talk to somebody later and they've lost that confidence. Trying to empower people is that you are the master of your own destiny. When I felt burnt out, when I felt that, a lot of that was in my head, and it affected my performance, affected me being able to solve it. And I would totally go back and change in different ways. Even now, when I get stressed about things, I'm like, I actually need to be able to take the 10 steps back. That's often when, my partner and I might be talking about things, and I'm like, you need to go to the airplane mode, step out of it to be able to really observe it. But you have to remember that you only get one life, right? And that we all make our choices, whatever those choices are on a daily basis, whatever those choices are in the environment, whatever those choices are, to walk past and accept and do that. But 100% in a team, you can create a psychologically safe environment, but it's also up to the individual. And we can't control people's lives. People are in control of their own lives. And I mean, if that's one thing that I would love to see, is that more people do take that empowerment, right? My unhappiness came from, I wasn't living life. I was very burnt out, all of these things. And then I fundamentally made changes to change it. Some were big steps, some were very, very scary, right? Some are still really, really hard. But I now live a life that I'm personally happy with. And I get to say to myself every day, but it's when we are unhappy in ourselves and there's something going on, and that's okay because it happens, right? You can have marriage breakdowns, things like that. Anything can go on. Family members pass away, whatever it is. There's things outside of your circle of control as well. But, and I'm sure we both know this sort of terminology, it's you are in control of how you approach that, how you view that. And it's empowering people to be able to take that construct to know you are in control of your life as much as you don't feel like you are in control. What can you be? And I know there's been multiple conversations, and we had somebody on the podcast previously who interviewed somebody who'd been in prisoner of war camps and lost all of their family. And when you read the books and what those people have done, often it was, what can I find out of the positive in this today? What is the learning? What can I control in this environment where I can't control anything? And we always do have control because we have control over choosing how we see and how we approach and what we do.
Mm.
And we also have to take accountability for ourselves and go, that behavior wasn't right. I've been there. I've even had it myself. That behavior wasn't right. And you might have to get out of it later and go, that was me. Right? There was environment factors, but that was me. That was on me. What did I do to do that? How could I have changed my perception? And it's hard. And it's particularly hard when you're burnt out. It's particularly hard when you don't feel safe. But coming back to that, you are in control of what you choose. And it's often when we find, you talked about that alignment. I'm probably using my language, but that if people aren't on board of where you're going and what you're doing, one, it's up to the organisation to be able to communicate that and to be able to say, this is where we are going. Please, and there's some companies that say, we are happy to pay you an exit fee. If you want to leave the company, we're happy for you to choose and we'll give you a few $1,000s because we would rather you leave than be unhappy and not be aligned to it. But at the same time, coming back to the psych safety, it is some of these very, very simple things that we can enable people to flourish, but we can have that environment. But if people also don't come to that with the right. So it is always that two-way street. It's like a tango at the end of the
Yeah.
day that we know both those parts. Very, very interesting. Look, we could probably talk for another hour and a half on these types of things. Helen, would you have any recommendations for some books, podcasts, people to follow, to think about if they're really interested in this, how they can create winning teams or more productive teams, whichever term you can use yours, in creating better outcomes for organizations using psychological safety is the word we use, but it could be other terminology. Is there things that you think is worth people having listened to and getting into?
Sure. The one that always it's the easiest one to absorb is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by
Yeah.
Patrick Lencioni. It's a parable. It's only a few hundred pages. People are busy. They will obviously gain a lot from it, even if it's just an understanding that this is one of the legs that are needed on the success of the stool of success.
Yeah.
And it's often missing. I could plug my own book called Safe, but it's not published yet. But
I look forward to it. We definitely include that in the show notes as well.
we haven't published it yet. Again, it's much more up to date versus Patrick Lencioni's. It drives much more about also remote working.
Yeah.
Because creating a high performing team when now we have a new market and we call it a one-way ticket to the future. It's not going backwards. Companies who try and go back to reset a 2020 company, because that's when we're almost functioning, the audience has left that and there's no going back. We've got to find a new way of creating the same high performing environment, trust and capability when we're remote.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what Safe is more about.
Yeah, great. I look forward to reading it. Well, for me, it'll be listening to it because I'm an audiobook, so please make a recording. And we very much look forward to that. Excellent. Thank you so much for all your time and sharing your story, and also a very important discussion into things. So one thing we didn't really cover off is probably more, there is obviously in Australia, psychological safety is now part of the requirements for work safe, and so WHS and OHS laws, and it's just finally come into Victoria too. So this is not just something that you need to take mind of to actually create a better organization and functioning teams. It's also something you need to be aware of, because if you're actually not doing, you could now actually be quite liable for things. So let's just keep that in mind for everybody as well. And that's why, there are these great tools that people, and that's why I try to not sell it so much from the compliance point of view, because that's the minimum, right? Really, what we're going for is, why would you hire people if you don't want great outcomes, right? If you have people, then what you're trying to do is get the absolute best out of your team, and to do that. And, it could be the difference between, you've talked about long hours, or you can achieve the same in 6 hours as you're trying to achieve in 12 hours, just because somebody is out calling out. Do we want to lose another $1 million, or should we all come to a bit of way, or I'm hiding this information and not helping others out? So, and we also don't want cultures of just yes men and women who, yes, sure, no problems. Otherwise, you might as well put some robots in, because it's going to be a much more effective outcome for you. So if you have people in your business, psych safety is just not one of those key terms you need to hear in those throwaways. We actually need to live it and breathe it. So we'll include in the show notes some things and some takeaways. And thank you so much, Hay Lam, for all of your time today.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to follow and subscribe. If you're liking this podcast, please rate it, because it will actually help other people as well. Now, beyond being able to subscribe, we also have a fantastic newsletter. So if you go to the be-connected.co podcast, you will actually be able to sign up for a newsletter, and you will get this on a weekly basis, with the latest podcast coming out twice a month, and a fantastic newsletter that will give you great insights into the industry, interesting topics of how you can grow professionally and also grow your businesses. We hope you enjoy, and thanks so much for listening.